All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Brittany, can you give me a thumbs up and let me know that you can hear me?
Yep, got you loud and clear.
Okay, great. All right, well, I see a bunch more people are joining, but I do want to get started. So first of all, my name is Karen Marikas. I am the president of the Southern California chapter of ICEA, and I'm also very involved with the ICEA OEM COG. And I have a feeling that we've got a bunch of people on the line today who may not be familiar with ICEA or with the OEM COG. So I just wanted to say a few words about that before I turn it over to Brittany, our speaker today. So first of all, ICEA, what is it? It's the International Cost Estimating and Analysis Association. So this is an industry organization. It's a nonprofit. And really the focus of this organization is to enhance the profession of cost estimating and cost analysis. And I will also add like data analysis, because lots of times when you're doing cost analysis or cost estimating, you also have other types of data like technical data or programmatic data or schedule data. So there's a lot of types of data involved. So it's not just the cost numbers. And so this organization has, I want to say, 7 different regions across the US, plus a couple of international regions. And then I'm going to guess about 30 different chapters. So I'm from the Southern California chapter, and we do webinars periodically and face-to-face events. Some of the other chapters do as well. And then ICEA also has an annual workshop. It's called an Annual Professional Development Workshop. It's usually held in May. Next year it will be, I believe it's May 14th to the 16th, and it is in Minneapolis. So if anyone is interested in attending that, start thinking about it now. And so what would you get out of ICEA if you become a member? Not only do you get access to the different chapters and the working groups and the annual conference. There's a huge networking, it's a huge networking opportunity, but also there's training. So if you're a member, you get free access to CBOC, which is Cost Estimating Body of Knowledge, which covers 16 different modules related to cost analysis, anything related to costs and finance and affordability. Then there's also the software cost estimating body of knowledge, which is fairly new, and that has about another 8 or 10 modules all related to software estimating. There are a couple of publications out there. There's the Journal of Cost Estimating and Parametrics. There's ICEA World, which is more of a magazine about what's happening with the organization and with the chapters. And then there's weekly emails that go out, email blasts. So if you're at all interested in learning more about ICEA, I would recommend that you go to the ICEA website, and maybe Megan could put that in the chat window for us. And you can take a look at all the things that are going on. All right, so that being said, I do want to jump in real quickly about what the OEM COG is. So that stands for the Original Equipment Manufacturers Cooperative Opportunity Group. It's a mouthful, I know, but for short, it's OEM COG. And the reason we have the OEM COG is because many of the participants who are part of ICEA are from the government sector or from I'll say the CETA contractors or the tool providers. And sometimes the issues that OEMs face are different than these other organizations. So we wanted to have a place where we could get OEMs across the industry talking to one another, sharing best practices, sharing risks, what are we having problems with? And then we often will schedule webinars. We do about 3 or 4 a year. And we also had a face-to-face meeting at the annual workshop last year. And we have presentations, we have discussions, panels sometimes about topics that are of interest to the OEMs. Now, sometimes these topics are also of interest to other people, but that's okay. but it's the group of people that's putting on these workshops and these webinars are from OEMs. All right, so moving on today to our presentation. So we are going to hear from Brittany Clayton. Brittany is from the RAND Corporation. She's an operations researcher, and you can see her face in the camera right now, smiling at us. Brittany joined RAND in 2018. And before that, she spent about a decade of civil service with the Naval Sea Systems Command, or NAVSEA. She has an MS in Operations Research from George Mason University and a BA with majors in both mathematics and Spanish, and that was from the Washington and Jefferson College. And so what Brittany's going to talk to us today about is digital engineering implications on weapon systems cost. And for those of you who may have attended a similar presentation, so Brittany did talk about this last year at the annual workshop. And what struck me from that presentation was that there's a lot of hype about digital engineering, but not necessarily a lot of data to go along with that hype or all the claims. And so that was one of the key takeaways I had. But anyway, Brittany will be talking about this same topic, and they have been doing some updated analyses, and she will be sharing some of those insights as well. So please help me welcome Brittany Clayton.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me today. Excited to get into the discussion. As Karen mentioned, I'm an operations researcher at the RAND Corporation. I've been here for about 5 years. Most of my work centers around cost estimating, so total life cycle estimating for weapon systems, analysis of alternatives, some of the cost estimates that support some of that acquisition type work, acquisition policy, risk analysis, schedule analysis, and some business case analysis. If you're unfamiliar with RAND, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We manage 4 FFRDCs, or federally funded research and development centers. One is dedicated to the Air Force, work for the Air Force. One's dedicated to the Army. One's dedicated to national security, and one is dedicated to Homeland Security. The work that we're going to talk about today was performed under the FFRDC that's dedicated to the Air Force, which is called Project Air Force. RAND also has some non-defense type work. We do work in the fields of healthcare, labor, education, and social and economic well-being. Before I came to RAND, I worked for NAVSEA 05C, the Naval Sea Systems Command, and I did cost estimating and risk analysis for surface ships, submarines, and onboard weapon systems. So happy to be here today. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to getting into the discussion here. So we have a few topics that we'll walk through in this presentation, and certainly open to questions and comments. So please feel free to put those into the chat, and we can get to those at the end of the briefing. First, we'll walk through what the project goals and objectives were for this discrete effort. Then we'll talk about digital engineering, how it's categorized in theory and in practice within the Department of Defense. Then we'll get into some insights into costs that may be impacted by digital engineering, costs and hopefully some benefits or savings. And then finally, we'll get into the findings and some additional research that is being performed and already been completed. So the work that I'm going to focus on today was sponsored by the Air Force Cost Analysis Agency. And we're focusing on digital engineering and its intersection with the cost estimate. So a lot of work has been done in the topic of digital engineering, what it means for aircraft, what it means for technology systems. Less has been done in the space of digital engineering and Department of Defense acquisition, and even less has been the intersection of digital engineering, defense acquisition, and the cost estimate. So we're trying to kind of touch all 3 of those piece parts, and that's where our area of focus was for this project. We had a multidisciplinary team. You can see the names of our team that are listed there. Amongst those names, we have 2 cost analysts, an economist, a systems engineer, a policy researcher, and 2 mechanical engineers. So we had a really multidisciplinary team that were coming at this problem and at this topic from a few different perspectives and a few different bringing their own expertise with it. This initial research was conducted between June of 2020 and 2021, so this is a little bit dated. However, we have just completed a follow-on study that we wrapped in September of this year. It's currently being reviewed, so I can't share too many of the findings from that research just yet, but maybe I'll come back in a few months and kind of give an encore of this and include some of the additional findings. At the end of this presentation, I'll walk you through what we did for this most recent study and can kind of tease some of the things that you can see in the coming months. So our research questions included: what does digital engineering mean to the Air Force and Department of Defense weapon system programs? How are defense programs implementing digital engineering? And which cost elements are going to be most impacted over the system's life cycle? To answer some of these questions, we took a multi-pronged approach. First, we looked at literature, open source literature, anything that was available to look at applicable examples of where digital engineering is being implemented, trying to categorize digital engineering into some major concepts. We tried to investigate government and industry roles within digital engineering, who traditionally is doing most of this work. And then finally explored policies that are affecting the implementation of digital engineering. Now, if you're familiar with the area of digital engineering, you know that it's very much a buzzword right now, especially in the Department of Defense. So if you look at a total aggregate of open source journal articles and literature that talk about digital engineering over the last decade, it looks like an exponential curve. You know, a decade ago or so, you couldn't really find the term too much, but now it's everywhere. So we had a good body of knowledge and good body of literature to work through, and that just continues to climb, the numbers of literature that are mentioning digital engineering specifically. A second approach we took is to have discussions with key experts. So we talked to digital engineering thought leaders, program offices that were endeavoring to implement digital engineering in some form or fashion, cost analysts that were struggling with figuring out how to account for digital engineering in their cost estimates. We tried to talk to the run-of-the-mill of everybody who's touching this space. We also explored program-specific documentation and data within some of the Pathfinder programs that the Air Force has identified as their key programs to really implement digital engineering full force. And then finally, we put on our cost estimator hats and looked at isolating work breakdown structure elements that are most likely affected by digital engineering. We identified potential areas for investments and for savings. And then finally, we summarized everything into our final report. This report has been finalized and published, although it is for official use only. So I can't openly send it out, but if you would like a copy of it, please get in touch and I can point you in the right direction of how to get a copy. Okay, so most estimators through the course of the weapon system that they're estimating, they will need to include some level of digital engineering cost impacts to their estimate. And this could look like a variety of different things, could take a variety of different forms. We're already seeing programs that are considering digital engineering strategies throughout the analysis of alternatives, kind of pre-milestone A, really early in the design process. We're already seeing programs starting to think about digital engineering at that point. Certainly throughout the life cycle of the cost estimate of a weapon system platform, you'll see some of these digital engineering impacts. Trade-off studies, depending on whether a program is a clean start, a new design, or some modification of an existing design, that may have an impact on how much digital engineering you can actually kind of cram into the acquisition of that system and into the design. So in some cases, a brand new clean sheet design enables or allows for some additional digital engineering because you can start making those digital artifacts really early in the life cycle. And then finally, an influence on confidence level during uncertainty analyses. We're hearing from some analysts that just their level of confidence in no schedule overruns and no cost overruns can change depending on the level of digital engineering that's being implemented. So I challenge you all as we're walking through some of these slides. How are you addressing digital engineering in your cost estimates or in your community? This audience is particularly interesting to me, and I'd love to get your perspective on the topic and on how your company is dealing with this, because you are really kind of the pioneers in developing some of these technologies and these approaches and really putting them to work. So really interested in how your company is dealing with digital engineering, and then also what additional research needs to be done to really successfully account for these approaches within cost estimates. Okay, so let's jump into how digital engineering is categorized in theory and in practice. Okay, so digital engineering has a pretty wordy definition according to the Department of Defense, and it is an integrated digital approach that uses authoritative sources of system data and models as a continuum across disciplines to support lifecycle activities from concept through disposal. So there's a lot there, but we can start to kind of unpack it layer by layer. So first is an integrated digital approach. This is developing digital products wherever possible that talk to each other. So not just within the engineering space or within the design space. Think broader for the entirety of all of the stakeholders, the program office, the designers, the contractor, the government. How can we build digital tools and digital models that lean on each other and are integrated and talk to each other as much as possible? For instance, if I'm a cost estimator and some of my cost estimate is dependent on weight-based cost estimating relationships, my model could, in theory, be linked to an engineering or design model in such a way that when the weight of a particular component is changed, increased or decreased, that is then filtered into my cost estimate, and the dollars and cents impact is felt almost immediately. So that's what we're talking about when we talk integrated digital approach, trying to get everything as integrated and modeled as possible, and identify and connect those linkages where we can. The second part is using authoritative sources of data and models. So you'll hear this term ASOT, which stands for authoritative source of truth for program information. This is really having some sort of centralized repository where the latest design information, the latest programmatic information, schedule information, cost information is all kept up to date, and the right people have access to the right level of information all the time. This is, I think, really good in theory. I think in practice, it's a little bit more difficult, especially with some configuration management issues. And when you have discrete entities like government and contractor working in different locations, that can create some barriers. But really, you want one location, one repository of the latest and greatest program information for the right people to access. The next layer of this is across disciplines. So we're not just talking the engineers or the designers of the system. We should be talking the budgeters, the schedulers, the costers, people working in the logistics chain, the supply chain, maintainers and operators. So really trying to leverage and push this digital engineering practice across all stakeholders. And then finally, supporting the gambit of life cycle activities. So from program initiation through disposal of the system, leveraging digital practices as much as possible. So it really is a pretty daunting task, and there's a lot that DoD is working to accomplish by defining digital engineering this way. So digital engineering, there's a policy, at least for the Air Force, that encourages digital engineering to the maximum extent practical, both for acquisition and for sustainment programs. So there's really a push and a focus on leaning on and adopting a lot of these practices as much as we can through the defense acquisition. You'll see the development of some new offices and roles that are dedicated to the advancement of digital engineering. You'll see new guides and policies that have been created, from 2018 and beyond, and continually updated. which is really trying to get all of the Air Force on the same page in terms of what they're implementing in digital engineering. So there's lots of examples of the shape and form of what digital engineering may look like through a traditional weapon system program. I would say no two programs are exactly alike. It's kind of a choose your own adventure book. So what we tried to do in this project was come up with some examples of activities that could be undertaken to promote digital engineering or adopt digital engineering practices throughout the life cycle of a defense acquisition program. So on the very start of a defense acquisition program, when you're in your material solution analysis, MSA, or your TMRR, really starting to establish model-based links between mission capability and system capability during the AOA. So really trying to bring some of this digitization as early as possible is one of the key goals of this whole endeavor. Using modeling to define requirements and the acquisition strategy, making sure the acquisition strategy is digitized and kept up to date throughout the entire acquisition process. Developing model-centric RFP and source selection artifacts. Defining data and model requirements that the prime must share with the government via SysML or another language. This is a key one. So really trying to make sure that we agree up front on what data gets shared across entities, who owns that data, and how it is kept updated. Developing data and model V&V steps, and then negotiating contract terms for digital deliverables. What is the contractor going to be required to deliver to the government, and at what frequency in terms of data, models, and intellectual property throughout the rest of the program. As you fast forward into engineering, manufacturing, development, EMD, starting to really focus on establishing in-house digital engineering capabilities and expertise within the government program office and beyond. The contractor digitally sharing the weapon system design models, data, and IP with the government. So there's some level of sharing data at that point already. Government engages more intensely with the contractor to reduce design, development, and verification costs and make some trade-offs. Streamline technical reviews, data reporting, V&V, test and evaluation. One thing we continually heard in our discussions in this project was trying to bring the tabletop kind of paper-based discussions and milestone decision reviews into a more digitized space. Instead of pulling up the PowerPoint and walking through slides like we are today, let's pull up the live model and tweak it and play around with what that looks like, what the design looks like, and see what improvements we can make. And then finally, when we get into production, deployment, and then O&S, maintaining and updating that data is really critical. So once you have all these digital artifacts, once you have the digital twin or the digital thread, making sure that gets handed to the right parties throughout sustainment and also kept up to date is really critical. Using models to inform cost and schedule trades during the operational testing phase, leveraging data and models in the pursuit of predictive maintenance. So how can we learn from some of the data that these systems are collecting to better predict what sorts of maintenance we need to do in the future? So like I said, in practice, every program that we spoke with is taking slightly different avenues to achieve digital engineering enlightenment. Not all of these activities that I just walked through are being undertaken by any one program. Experts that we spoke with had varying definitions of digital engineering. They had varying goals and purposes as to why they are implementing digital engineering. You know, are they focused mostly on the schedule of their program? Are they trying to reduce cost? Are they trying to build a very complex system, which they can't do without the help of digital engineering? So what are the main goals of digital engineering? That will help to define what activities a program undertakes. Some of the level of enthusiasm or undertaking of digital engineering was dictated by the program's life cycle. So if the program is really early on and you have some time within a clean sheet design to inject digital engineering and really start to adopt some of the digital engineering practices, you may have more of an opportunity as opposed to a program that's already into production or into sustainment. You may have some limited opportunities to really adopt true digital practices. Another thing that dictated the level of digital engineering was the enthusiasm by program leadership. We saw this in the first project and in our most recent project. The enthusiasm or the energy set at the top really helped to infiltrate digital engineering thought processes all the way down the chain. Experience within the program office was another one. If the program was a very large program and it had some resources to build up teams of people that were more familiar with digital or focusing solely on digital engineering practices, they may have a little bit more leeway than some of the smaller programs that don't have those resources. We spoke with a variety of defense programs that were trying to implement digital engineering. I have a few here that are anonymized. I'm not providing program names, but the first program was within TMRR. This program was using high fidelity digital models in the hopes to achieve a few things: support faster deployment times, support smaller batches of iteratively upgraded platforms, troubleshoot assembly and design, and then identify issues and maintenance before the physical system actually existed. Program B, which was in EMD at the time, was leveraging training simulators, using digital approaches, leaning on model-based systems engineering, and 3D design tools throughout the EMD process. And finally, the third program that we spoke with was really focused on SysML-based models to inform decisions, the government reference architecture, which was being used to capture, store, link, and use relevant design data, and then creating a digital twin. So every program that we spoke with was kind of focused on some different activities within the digital engineering space. Some of the benefits that we've seen the Department of the Air Force expect from digital engineering, we tried to categorize these in terms of cost, schedule, and performance. There is an expected benefit of more accurate requirements, which could lead to avoiding cost overruns or more stable cost estimates, iteratively designing digitally at a minimal cost, and then moving down the cost improvement curve faster. So trying to get down the learning curve more aggressively as you're building units. Some other portfolio benefits, more development cycles resulting in less operating and maintenance spending. So actually increasing the number of acquisition programs that we have and doing so more quickly so that we're sustaining them for a shorter amount of time. In terms of schedule, getting to a better design faster, developing a more efficient development process, allowing acquisition systems to regain enough speed to support more frequent program starts. In terms of performance, increasing complexity. We heard from several program offices that said they wouldn't be able to develop a system that is as complex as what they're building now without the help of digital engineering. So there seems to be a lot of benefits that we're hearing anecdotally and from Air Force leadership on the expectation of digital engineering benefits. A lot of these, however, are based on a few key assumptions. The Department of Defense and Department of the Air Force can enable, that digital engineering can enable them to achieve an acquisition speed that overmatches the enemy, that government can implement this to scale across their programs, that industry is willing to restructure and play in a committed role in terms of digital engineering. And then finally, digital engineering is doing what it says it's going to do. The digital twins are accurate and robust enough to replace or reduce physical prototyping. The authoritative source of truth works as it's intended. So in our research, we found that there is plenty of anecdotal evidence of digital engineering benefits. We found almost no verifiable empirical evidence. So nothing that it was really data driven that said digital engineering is going to save X% in terms of schedule or dollars. Some of the anecdotal benefits we heard included physical prototyping. So digital models may reduce the need for costly physical prototypes, reducing physical test and evaluation events. So bringing those into the virtual space as much as possible. Some efforts to improve manufacturing, allow for greater optimization of requirements in manufacturing designs. Weapon system capability, so digital development enables more spiral or development efforts, smaller total quantities, and greater diversity of fielded systems. One thing we heard specifically recently was a program office is bringing in their maintainers and operators into the design discussion a little bit earlier, which is not entirely a novel concept that's been in the works for a long time now. But the operator or maintainer being able to sit down and look at a 3D design or look at a virtual reality of the actual design can actually really improve the feedback that they're providing to the government or back to the contractor to improve the design. So that tight feedback loop and that immediate feedback of what the operator challenges or issues are really helped make a better design. Okay, so providing insight into costs that might be impacted by digital engineering. As I mentioned, the focus of our project was not only digital engineering and defense acquisition, it was also where those two intersect with the cost estimate. So here we'll put on our cost estimator hats and try to put some cost perspective in here. So we talked to several cost analysts that were working to incorporate digital engineering into their cost estimate. There was some uncertainty around what digital engineering means to the Air Force. And a lot of this we heard back in 2020 when we started our initial project. We still are hearing some of this. I think it's improving, but there is still some concern or some confusion about really what digital engineering means to each program office. The familiarity of digital engineering concepts varied from program to program. There are challenges with isolating digital engineering from some other initiatives like agile acquisition. And there was differences to how digital engineering is being implemented by programs. There was some confusion around the roles and responsibilities of government versus contractor, who's doing what, who's responsible for which piece of the digital engineering pie. Concerns over classification that will create with integration and sharing of data and models. And we continue to hear this as an issue. As programs are classified in nature, it's more difficult to transfer data, transfer models, and share some of that information and design across entities. The enterprise efforts to support digital engineering are still being defined and not mature. I think this is improving. Training opportunities certainly are. There's a lot more in terms of literature out there, in terms of training materials to learn about digital engineering and what it means to the defense acquisition. However, some challenges with computing power, getting access to the right level of software package, those can still be time consuming and challenging. And then finally, limited evidence and no methodology to support adjusting program costs to account for digital engineering. So there's still not enough runtime in the data that cost analysts are leveraging to include or incorporate cost adjustments for digital engineering. So we heard a few more insights that could have implications for the cost analysts, things that we wanted to make sure the cost analysts were paying attention to. The first, in terms of definition, cost analysts are going to need to work really closely with the program office to make sure that they understand the goals that digital engineering is working to achieve, the activities that are being undertaken, how the program office is doing it, things like that. In terms of implementation, cost analysts may wish to deliberately take different approaches depending on what activities are being undertaken by their program office. So their digital engineering cost increases or cost savings will likely look very different from estimate to estimate, and may even look different as the program goes through its life cycle. In terms of benefits, we heard a lot about cost avoidance. So perhaps the dollars and cents, you're not shaving dollars off of the cost estimate in terms of the benefits, but it provides some more confidence in achieving a particular schedule or a particular cost. So it may increase the cost that you have, in your uncertainty analysis. In terms of measurement, estimating for discrete estimates or investments like training courses, software licenses, and computing power could be pretty straightforward, but quantifying downstream benefits will likely be more challenging and will require a greater runtime than we've had to date. Getting programs through production and deployment and through a good portion of their life in sustainment, it may take us a few decades to really get our hands around what certain digital engineering activities, the impact they have throughout the life. And then finally, stakeholder relationships. There is a push to regenerate some expertise within the systems engineering field within the government. So trying to really build out that level of expertise will take some time. The Air Force identified 6 main areas of focus to accomplish digital engineering. These are often called lines of effort, and they're really just categorized some of the required investments to achieve particular digital engineering activities. One's IT infrastructure, which can include the bandwidth, computing power, storage capabilities. A second is modeling and tools, so making sure you have the right software licenses, down selecting to the right software. A third is standards, data, and architecture. This could look for data rights or establish the government reference architecture for a program. Lifecycle strategies and processes, the maintenance of those software packages that we purchased earlier. Policy and guidance, digital engineering guidebook updates, specific policy updates. And then finally, workforce and culture. So some general digital engineering training, software-specific training. We tried to add a layer of responsibility on some of these investment costs, which would be really attributed to the greater Air Force, and which would be a program office type cost. You can see that by the color coding of the org chart that we have here. But this was really just a way to help frame some of the investment costs that cost estimators will need to account for within their estimate into some clearly defined buckets. Some examples that we heard from a variety of our discussions that we had with program offices and cost analysts, a certain number of full-time equivalents or FTEs that were dedicated to a particular activity, the purchase of particular software packages or licenses. These were some of the concrete examples that you could kind of hang beneath each of those 6 LOEs. So we developed a repeatable or generalized framework for considering the costs and benefits of digital engineering. First, we started thinking about the investments that would be required to create enablers of digital engineering, which would lead to those enablers being available. And that can be associated with the lines of effort that we just went through. The enablers would enable some digital engineering activity to be pursued, so the program office could implement some level of digital engineering. And those activities in aggregate would achieve some digital engineering environment or digital engineering enlightenment. And then once that digital engineering environment is established, you should see some benefits, both cost and non-cost. So we started thinking about this in terms of execution, which goes from left to right. You need the investments in order to purchase the enablers to enable the activities to get to that digital engineering environment to reap the benefits. But in terms of planning, programs should think backward. What benefit are you trying to achieve? What's the goal of digital engineering? In order to achieve that goal, what do you need to do in terms of your activities? In order to implement those activities, what enablers do you need? And in order to get those enablers, what investments do you need to make? So kind of a bit of a backwards planning. The cost estimate, the life cycle cost estimate from cradle to grave, really aims to account for the bookends of that flow chart. So we came up with a generalized process for cost estimators to start to think about implementing digital engineering changes into their cost estimate. The first step was to familiarize the cost team with the concepts and goals of digital engineering. Take a look at a lot of the, the guidebooks, the white papers, a lot of the educational materials that are out there to familiarize yourself with what digital engineering is trying to achieve, the jargon, some of the acronyms and whatnot. The second step is to coordinate with the program office to understand how they are implementing digital engineering. What are they trying to achieve? What activities are being undertaken? Who's managing those activities? What are the costs that the program expects to have to achieve those activities? And what benefits are they hoping for downstream? The third step is to identify specific investments and benefits that are applicable to your program or your estimate. Line up those investments with the enablers that we went through, those 6 categories, and then map each investment to your work breakdown structure. And then finally, step 4, incorporate investments and benefits into the estimate using some generally accepted approach. This will likely look very different for each analyst from estimate to estimate, but could include adjusting the point estimate. So you're actually making a bottom line change to your point estimate. Incorporate some change into your uncertainty analysis. Perhaps your bounds around a particular input are tighter because digital engineering is allowing the program office to gain confidence in what they're doing. Or finally, develop sensitivity analysis. So trying to do some what if scenarios or excursions. So those 4 steps we shared with our sponsor and with others to start to get cost analysts thinking about how they can incorporate cost savings and cost investments into their estimate. So finally, some major findings and some more recent work that we've been doing. So the 5 findings that we have in our final report for this project. Programs so far have used a tailored implementation of digital engineering to address unique challenges to those programs. No digital engineering slate of activities looks the same from program to program. That still holds true in the research that we've been conducting more recently. Every program is taking a slightly different approach to implementing digital engineering for a variety of reasons. The second finding, before cost savings or other benefits from digital engineering efforts can be realized, there's likely to be a need for significant investments made by the Department of Defense and the Air Force. You're already seeing some of that with some of the offices that are being stood up to focus solely on digital engineering, some of the roles within program offices and the working groups that are really starting to start and continue the conversation about digital engineering. A third finding is that investments to support digital engineering will likely impact both contractor and government program office costs. So I think everybody has a responsibility in this, and all entities are probably going to be footing the bill for certain aspects of digital engineering. The fourth is that digital engineering could be employed for a variety of reasons beyond potential cost savings. So a lot of programs that we spoke with were not really interested in cost savings as much as they were achieving schedule constraints or building a system that was more complex than they could do without digital engineering. So there's some real goals that are not cost related that programs are focusing on. And finally, although there's plenty of anecdotal evidence, there's almost no verifiable data to inform cost analysts on the magnitude or likelihood of cost savings generated from digital engineering efforts. One thing I think we have in our favor, and we all just maybe need to be a little patient with this, is as these programs that are implementing digital engineering today continue to go through their major acquisition milestones, continue to reach sustainment and operations, and really continue to collect a lot of that cost, schedule, and performance data, we'll have a much better picture on what the digital engineering activities have done in terms of cost, schedule, and performance. So some follow-on work that we have completed but is not published yet and is still being reviewed, so I can't share all of the findings yet, but we tried to do a few things in this new project. One was continue the literature review from the initial project. What new literature is out there, what new studies have been done. There's a lot in this space, so we tried to get through as much of that as we could. We conducted deep dives into 4 Pathfinder programs. We spoke with those programs and looked at some program documentation to get our hands around what each program was doing in terms of digital engineering and what impacts that had. We had an added focus on this project on how digital engineering impacts the supply chain. And to support that research, we designed and executed a survey to aerospace industry primes and suppliers that investigated a few key areas, the activities that were being pursued, challenges with implementing digital engineering, both internally in that company and then up and down the supply chain as they saw it, costs and benefits of digital engineering, and then some metrics that are being collected at the at each of the primes and subcontractors that we surveyed. So this work is currently being reviewed and should be released in the next few months. So I'm happy to keep everybody updated on that and come back and share those findings when I have the approval to do so. I really have enjoyed researching digital engineering. There's a lot of really good work that's there. Unfortunately, we're not seeing a lot of the hard data and cost savings that we were hoping to see by now. But I think time will continue to enable us to see what activities are being undertaken, the impact that that activity has, and then continue to share those lessons learned with future defense programs. So that's all I have in terms of my slides. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, the good news is, Brittany, you got a lot. I'm going to go through them in order for everybody. The first one came from Kevin Sincata. What software is available to integrate digital engineering and the cost model all in one model as an integrated digital approach?
That's a great question.
And there were a few replies in the chat of folks suggesting that it's possible in some programs like SEER and True Planning, I believe.
You know what? That's a good one. I don't know if I have any additional software packages to add to that.
Hey, this is Karen. I would add that, some people said SEER, H, and price true planning into Excel, but also consider Model Center or some of the tools that act more like a framework that you can pull in different tools so that they all talk to one another. Yeah. I'd say Cameo is another one that I know there's been some interfaces with, definitely with Excel, but with some other tools as well.
I'm not sure if there's really one model that is going to answer the mail for the entire weapon system. One thing we heard from our most recent project is most companies are using bespoke or kind of homegrown tools and not using a lot of the commercial widely available tools because they need the model to do something so specific, and they have it built already because they've been doing this for years and years. So that's one thing that we heard in our latest project. But that's a good question. I don't think I have any more to add to that list.
All right. Well, then the next question says, at a glance, digital engineering faces the same challenge a non-digital would, which is the difficulty in scaling up as a project gets larger or sustains longer. How does digital address or exacerbate this issue differently than non-digital engineering systems?
That's a good question too. I think one thing that it helps with is the availability of data and information across stakeholders. So that going back to that authoritative source of truth, and that ASOT, where there's one central repository where all stakeholders can have access to the most relevant and latest information that they need to do their job. Everybody's on the same page. You hopefully will avoid some of the errors or rework that is created by using outdated information or using this outdated schedule, outdated design. So I think it helps in that regard. It does get the configuration management of that, however, I think gets exacerbated very quickly because there needs to be somebody owning the central repository, keeping that up to date, making sure that the data that's in there is authoritative, and the right people have access to it at the right time. So I think there's probably a combination of both of those points where it eases some of that access to data and information, but increases the need for configuration management of that system.
Okay, then our next question is, how does ASOT differ than standard CM practices?
I think the focus of the ASOT, and again, this is kind of in theory, I have yet to see that there's a few instances of programs that I've spoken with that have begun to crack the code on how they're sharing data and information across stakeholders and across government, prime, subcontractors. ASOT is certainly a theory. I think it's probably easier, like I said, to gain access to the most relevant information. As a cost estimator, if I sit down and I know the data and design that I'm looking at is the most relevant, the most, the latest and greatest, I have more confidence in the numbers that I'm generating in my cost estimate. I don't know if we're at the level in any program that I've spoken with where everybody in the program office, including the cost estimators, including the primes and subcontractors, have the right access to the right level of information. I don't think I've seen an example of that yet.
Okay. Is there a point in the major acquisition pathway that is seen as too late to incorporate digital engineering?
I think it depends on who you ask. Certainly, as I mentioned, from the research and the discussions that we've had with program managers and others in this space, starting with a clean sheet design, starting at the beginning of an acquisition phase, really enables you to do things digitally the first time. So you're not reworking or redoing any of that downstream. However, I am aware of a few programs that are in their sustainment phase that are working on modifications to a system. So they're trying to change the system in a particular way, add a new component, change out a component, deal with obsolescence. And they're trying to digitize that piece part or that new component. So sometimes in operations and sustainment, there will be an opportunity to put some of that digitally. I think it's more difficult for systems that are in the sustainment phase to really reverse engineer some of that work. Part of it is the design, just making sure you have the latest design for a system that's in sustainment can be really difficult. You end up reverse engineering, I think, a lot of those components, which can be time consuming and can lead to errors. So I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. I think the earlier on in the life cycle, the more opportunity you have to inject digital engineering.
Okay. Another question says, I had thought I heard you say earlier that it could make you more confident, less variability in cost estimates. But on a later slide, it talks about increasing your uncertainty in your cost analysis. This may be a little timed question, might be hard to pin down at this point.
So my point is that some of the digital practices can increase confidence in things like achieving a particular schedule, keeping test and evaluation costs down, and gaining confidence in some components of the cost estimate. I don't think I forgive me if I misspoke there. I don't think I said increased uncertainty in the cost estimate. You may be able to account for some digital engineering within your uncertainty analysis. So if you're conducting a true cost uncertainty analysis, you have your S curve, you may be able to argue a higher level of confidence within that S curve if you are more confident in the estimates going in.
Another question, do you have any high-level rules of thumb for estimating the impact of digital engineering on a program, especially regarding to SE and PM?
Certainly those 4 steps that I mentioned in the earlier slide, talking to the program office and understanding what the program, what the prime, what the subcontractors are doing to implement digital engineering has got to be the first got to be the first or second thing you do once you get familiar with the terms and what digital engineering really means. Unfortunately, the hard data and the cost numbers that we rely on so heavily as cost analysts, they're really just not there widespread. I think it's going to take us a few more years to really understand the costs of investing in digital engineering and hopefully the benefits that we get downstream. So no, unfortunately, I don't have any rules of thumb in terms of it will save X percentage of schedule or X percentage of cost. Those metrics don't exist right now, but just being aware of what the program is doing, I think is paramount.
Well, it seems like that wraps up the questions. We're having a lively chat session. So those of you who are on, a lot of good back and forth on the chat, but it looks like you managed to have answered all of the questions, which I wasn't sure you were going to get to do.
Very cool. Well, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity. I mean, this group, this brain trust here that we have online is really, I've probably spoken with some of you on this project or our follow-on project. So thank you for your insights. And if there's anything I got wrong or anything that you can help me understand a little bit better, please feel free to reach out. We're continuing this discussion, even though my project is over. It's certainly of interest to me. So I appreciate the time and thanks for having me.
Thank you for speaking for us. We just got a compliment in the chat that this is the most valuable session, most relevant presentation to their day-to-day job that they've seen in some time. So kudos to you and thank you for all of that. Karen, do you want to say anything to close us out or shall I take care of it?
I'll just say thank you everyone for attending and thank you, Brittany. I think based on the comments, it was very well received, very informative. And I know I personally will be reaching out to you about some things that potentially we could get a larger conversation going on. And I'll turn it back to you, Megan.
Awesome. Well, I can't say any more than that than the ladies have said thus far. So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Looking forward to seeing you again next time. I hope everybody has a great holiday, and we will be posting the video and the recording and the slides on the website about lunchtime tomorrow. And until then, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you.